Hello and welcome to another episode of the Uncited Podcast. This is Diana.
Hi, this is Natasha.
How are you? Hope you had a happy Thanksgiving. Okay, that was dramatic. It was my keyboard, excuse me. I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving.
It was a much needed break from work, and yes, I had a good Thanksgiving. How about you?
I didn't do anything, did I? Did we do some? Oh, we went shopping, so
Shopping.
that was something. Yes. Other than that, it's been quiet, but it could be worse, right? Lots of countries right now are in like serious quarantine, so we should be grateful that we were able to physically go outside and shop.
And we should be thankful for the healthcare workers who are working tirelessly and the scientists, because of whom we have a vaccine candidate, or
Yes,
candidates rather.
candidates, not one, but like three
Yeah,
very viable candidates, which is like every podcast we make, it seems like more vaccines are appearing.
yeah,
It's fun,
it's
fun
fun.
times.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of scientists, we live in like curious times, with COVID and everything. I think people are becoming health conscious, but are also becoming very suspicious of scientists in general. And that brought up in our minds another scientific suspicion topic, which is climate change.
Yeah. And we'll begin by stating that it is a thing.
Yes, yes. It's especially lately, like I remember I was seeing things like 4 or 5 years ago, and then they kind of stopped because they found other things like flat Earth or whatever, and they went there. And now they're back in the denying climate change exists realm again.
Yeah. All you need to do is there is plenty of evidence for climate change. All the easiest thing to do is to go to the NASA website and pull up the record on the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, and that's where everything begins.
But what happens when people don't trust the NASA website? That's the thing, because
Oh yeah, because moon landing never happened,
moon
really.
landing never happened. I mean, I just mentioned the Earth is flat and NASA is lying and they're manipulating images of the Earth. Like, you can start to question pretty much everything, but like up to what point?
Yeah, when does it stop?
And especially on a topic like this, because you could say the Earth is a triangle, like it doesn't really matter what your opinion is. But climate change affects us all. And even though we used to talk about it as a very long term thing, maybe our grandchildren will face some difficulties, like the effects are now, they're happening already.
It's happening for the past 200 years, but it's only now that we have started to experience the big effects of the change. So, the Earth's climate has been through several cycles of climate
Mhm.
change, and I think, if I remember correctly, the last ice age ended about 11,000 years ago, and that kind of marked the beginning of the human civilization.
It's kind of recent in Earth years, considering it's like 4.5 billion or
Yeah,
whatever.
it is very recent, and the recent changes in the climate change is completely attributable to human activities because it's no coincidence that the revolution started about mid 18th century, and then 200
Hmm.
years after that we start seeing changes in the levels of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere. So that's not mere coincidence.
Or manipulated data, as much as some people would like to believe. But
Yeah.
first of all, I want to believe that pretty much everyone knows what climate change is because, we learn it at school, you hear about it all the time. The only thing you don't hear about is that once you learn it at school, someone should tell you that, hey, one day, if you go and you say this in public, people are going to say you're a communist. Like, that was not a thing back then. It was just common knowledge that, hey, we are destroying the ozone layer, there's the greenhouse effect, the sea levels are going to rise, right? Like in all school systems, that's a thing. I feel, and it's everywhere. And now suddenly everyone's like, no, because when the dinosaurs lived, the carbon dioxide levels were super high. I'm like, okay, good for dinosaurs, but like, how does that correlate to what humans can survive? What current plants and animals can survive?
And so things have become very political now. It's the Sadly the current administration didn't like acknowledge the effect of climate change on our existence. And that kind of has molded people's mind towards thinking that it's probably not a big problem, sadly.
It's funny how you can like not acknowledge it because people are noticing. There's sea levels, as I said, are rising, glaciers are melting. We do see a global increase in temperature. I mean, of course, it's not 50 degrees of an increase, but it's even an increase of half a degree Celsius could be dramatic for the livelihood of some plants or animals. We see acidic rain, we see people developing more and more allergies. It's
The Earth's surface temperature has increased by 2 degrees centigrade.
That's crazy.
Yeah, although it might seem subtle at right now, but imagine if it continuously starts to increase. The time to act is actually now, and as we speak, we are still emitting carbon dioxide, and yeah,
I think COVID was maybe beneficial in that aspect.
you would think that, and I put some thought into that, but actually, that takes me to the next topic. But people have been spending a lot of time on internet thanks to COVID.
So how is the internet related to?
Yeah, you wouldn't think about how internet is related to climate change, but the internet is supported by several servers and data centers which need powering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you need a lot of energy to even cool these systems down because the servers are handling like several gigabytes of data at once, and even a unique Google search can emit about zero point 0.2 to 7 grams of carbon dioxide. So
So I want you all now to sit and think how many times have you Googled something stupid, not knowing that you were causing harm to the environment?
I know, right? It was like a realization for me as well. Um, so yeah, and you wouldn't think that your Netflix or YouTube habit would have such impact on the environment. I'm sure that a COVID lockdown has caused an increase in the internet traffic.
Yeah, we don't realize that. We see internet as like an ethereal thing, but it's very physical. It's like a heavy industry if you look at it from the standpoint of those huge like underground server centers and the cooling and the power and like what do they use? I don't know. They probably use coal-powered plants.
Yeah, I mean, except Apple claims that all their data centers are powered by renewable energy.
That's good.
So you can maybe make an informed decision on what cloud you want to invest on. So all the big companies, I'm sure they are trying to switch from fossil fuels to renewable energy, but the small ones are probably still dependent on fossil fuels.
Yeah, because it's expensive. Like transitioning, doing a
Totally.
full 180 to renewable needs an infrastructure, and unless you have a government support, which a lot of European countries do, like they will offer you up to sometimes like 80% of the cost plus low interest loans if you want, for example, to turn your house into a quote unquote like green building, or if you want to purchase an electric car. And there's a lot of initiative in countries, for example, such as the Netherlands. They are planning to fully transition to electric cars by 2030.
Wow. But the question is, will it be affordable to the common man?
You have to take a lot of things into account, like the median income, which is high in some countries, not so high in others. And of course, they're investing a lot of money into subsidizing and helping citizens with that. And of course, I want to hope that by 2030, we will have more affordable options for electric cars. We already do, because right now we have like 5 or 6 viable options. And of course, Tesla is not a viable option for the
Not at all.
for the everyday lad.
Yeah. So if you think of the cloud, I'm not talking about the puffy cloud, but the cloud. It's made up of servers and data centers, right? So data, anything, all your emails, the videos that you stream on YouTube and Netflix, they run through cables, which are fiber optic cables. And guess where they are placed?
Where?
These fiber optic cables run across the bottom of the ocean. They run transatlantic, and I think there's nearly 2 million kilometers of cables underneath.
That's great. I keep hearing this, like the transatlantic cables, but I really cannot visualize it. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm like, I think I'm gonna go and Google pictures of cables underwater. Like it sounds very sci-fi to me, but it has happened. It's really cool.
I know, right? And I heard about this for the first time in Latif Nasser's Connected series in one of the episodes,
Hmm.
which was, I guess, it was called Clouds.
Okay, very descriptive.
And all his episodes are like named with one word.
Hmm.
And these fiber optic cables, they have to be preserved, right? Because things are not really predictable down there, and you have the wildlife and stuff.
You have a whale like crashing into the fiber
So
optic
they have
cables.
to be whale and shark proof. So a lot of safety coding goes around them to
Hmm.
make sure. And also, it has to be preserved from the damage caused by water.
And how do you maintain this? You just like pull it back and then you fix it and you pull it back in.
I have no idea, but the episode did mention a special ship that basically travels and helps in the placement of these cables. I guess they are involved in the repair work also.
All I know about those cables is what we see like outside the house, whenever you see like orange spray on grass, and then there's like a sign that says fiber or Google next to it. Yeah, here are the cables. You can't use it, but here's the infrastructure for you.
Yeah. So basically, 2 million kilometers, Latif says, is enough distance for you to travel to the moon and back 3 times. So that's how long these cables are. It's crazy down there. So every time you upload anything on the internet, it's basically being transported underground.
Podcast is being transported like transatlantically. Oh, I said it right. And we're also creating a huge carbon footprint, so it better be good. No pressure.
Not as much as podcasts that also do videos.
Yeah, that's why we don't do video actually.
That
We're
is
meant to
why.
tell you, but we're very sensitive to climate change, so we're like, nah,
We were just being responsible.
it's not worth it.
You're welcome. So, talking about carbon footprints, you know what other industry has a big carbon footprint?
I'm sure you'll tell us.
You're correct. It's the meat industry.
Mm-hmm.
So, going back to the game changers and the stuff about animals being the middlemen. So, a lot of agricultural land is used up in livestock. They have to be maintained, right? They need a lot of acres of land to.
Hopefully, if they're like grass fed.
Mhm. And then you need to also cultivate plants to basically feed these middlemen, and then that's how um, it gets to people, and cattle becomes beef and stuff.
And their waste, and the waste of food in general, the methane, I was like reading at some point that the methane from cows, basically cows farting, is like a huge problem. And I'm like, wow.
I don't
It
know.
really, I read like an actual serious article about it.
Is it about them farting?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and
I thought the main source was their poop.
yeah, and feces, but it was mostly the methane caused from cow farting. And I'm like, huh, that seems very academic. I'm gonna read it.
And so that's a good source, or that's a problem.
Yeah. Apparently, it's like a big percentage.
Mm.
That and also a very big percentage that we're wasting a lot of food, which
Hmm.
is ridiculous. Like at least if you're gonna leave the carbon footprint, you might have the decency to like consume it all, or don't produce more that you can possibly consume.
That is correct. They generate a lot of waste too, and which is why it might be a good time to consider plant-based diets.
But if everyone, let's say everyone like turns vegan, then we would consume more plants. So we would like deplete the planet of plants.
We would need more agricultural land to grow plants, and then agricultural wildfires and stuff. Yeah, I mean, problems are everywhere. What we need to do is like make changes and moderate changes rather than go to extremes.
Yeah. I mean, I've been trying. I haven't turned vegan yet, or nor am I planning to, but I have been trying to, I don't know, maybe switch meat with something else whenever I can. But then I think of scenarios like, if everyone turns vegan and then there's a lot of cows and no one eats them anymore, so they rebel against us. And it's like this huge herd of cows that takes over humanity. Do you ever think about that as a vegan?
They won't live forever, right? And we have a lot of cows because they are being grown to feed humans. And if humans don't require have that demand, then there shouldn't be a problem with the supply.
I'm pitching this to Hollywood. Like after Planet of the Apes, imagine Planet of the Cows. Cows taking over like the developed speech and everything. I'm sorry, this is not very scientific. I
But I have seen bulls avenging and going wild. It happens often.
Okay.
Anyway,
So we understand the
a lot of
effects.
yeah, a lot of water is also consumed in the maintenance of
Yeah,
livestock, and
true.
there was a stat mentioned which kind of surprised me. So one hamburger represents 2,400 liters of fresh water. So that's how much water you can save.
By not eating that hamburger. Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, so we have pretty much, there are all these sources of carbon, and we are basically ruining the planet. We have been doing so, especially since the 50s. There has been this huge spike. And there's a report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which declared that at least 95% of the global warming since the 50s is man made.
Yes.
I really hope someone would come out and be like, no, it's 100%, because this 5%, like gap that they leave, people are coming out and they're like, no, they're lying.
Mm.
No, they're paid to lie. But what is actually funny is that who started studying those the climate change effects?
No.
Exxon scientists.
Interesting.
So it's the classic example of something will come back and bite you in the ass. So once Exxon started getting big, they wanted to know, like, yeah, what is this gonna cause long term? What are the effects if we keep like increasing our production and our extraction of oil? So they paid a bunch of scientists and they said, go explore that. And the scientists came back and they're like, well, it doesn't look that good. So they were like, okay, let's chill for a few years and do it again. And I think they did this.
Was the results of the study published or made available to the public?
I don't think so, because back then you could have internal
Mm-hmm.
investigations. So someone at some point leaked those investigations. That's how we know. And in 1982, the scientists, they go back again to look at the data, and they're like, it's really not good. It's like sea levels will rise, and they basically predicted everything that's happening. And Exxon's response was, of course, well, let's kind of forget about this because we're making a lot of money lately. So, no. Yeah, that's interesting. The things you fund, huh? But then again, everything has turned very political nowadays. And it's crazy, especially during the Trump era.
Yeah.
For some reason, climate change was legitimately associated with socialism. And this, like, is beyond me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like associating, I don't know, like evaporation of water to a specific party. And you're like, water evaporates. And no, that's a democratic notion. And you're like, why? But in reality, it was Republicans who started mentioning and bringing the attention to climate
What
change.
an irony.
And then it suddenly, I don't know what happened, because Nixon is the one who created the EPA,
Mm-hmm.
the Environmental Policy
Protection.
I thought it was EPP.
Like PPE.
Then Ronald Reagan signed the Montreal Protocol to protect the ozone layer, which did help in the long term. And Bush Sr. also made this a whole thing in his campaign back in '88. And now suddenly we have people being like, climate change is
a hoax,
a total democratic hoax to get your vote. And it's going to cost people millions of jobs, and people are going to die, and it's not real, and it's exaggerated. And I guess if you hear something like, we're getting brainwashed, is what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was a very bad timing for the current administration to pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement.
Exactly.
And I'm glad that Biden plans on joining it back, provided he's given the office.
And I mean, I don't want to turn this too political, but of course, there are a lot of issues with the Green New Deal. Like, from a scientific perspective, yes, like there are a lot of points that kind of suck. But on the other hand, like, you got to start somewhere, right? You got to start pouring money into those renewable resources. And I also don't understand why no one's talking about nuclear power. Like, we're so terrified of nuclear accidents that we'd rather sacrifice the entire planet in fear of there might be like a meltdown. And they only happen usually when the plants are not properly maintained, when they're super old. Like, it's amazing clean energy that could power us all. So
yeah, nukes have this kind of weird reputation about them, and we can't blame people for being scared about them either.
Yeah, like everything, there's been accidents with the oil industry, like, beyond count.
Oil leakings to oceans, and people are still struggling to clean the waters from the oil
The
leakage.
fish are dying, animals are dying, like, people are getting basically poisoned, their water is getting poisoned, but we don't talk about that, and we talk about like 2 isolated incidents, which of course were absolutely terrible and they cost people their lives. But looking at it broadly, if I were president, and I may or may not be running for 2024. No, I can't. I actually can't.
Yeah.
Like, that's where I would bet my money.
Yeah, and not because she's not capable, but because she's not a natural born citizen of the United States.
And I don't want to do the whole Obama Hawaii investigation, but with Greece, and be like, is she really? No, she's not. Well, that was pretty much all on climate change. Leave us a comment and tell us how you feel about climate climate change?
Oh, I feel very strongly about climate change and jokes apart, like plant-based diets apart. Like there's a little bit everyone can do and
Mm-hmm.
incorporate or adopt or cultivate good habits that will make sure that even if it can be as simple as, moderating your internet usage. Like if say if you have a book and there is a movie based out of the book, plan to read the book instead of watching the movie. It's the same
Yeah.
thing. And you can reduce the carbon footprint and the carbon dioxide emissions. And these small, small changes will go a long way in saving our planet.
And stop watching cat videos. It's 2020. Get over it.
Yeah, and you can also
That's enough cat videos, okay?
you can also help the scientists. Apparently, in West Texas, there is this weather modification association, and what weather modification they do is they basically fly, take an aircraft, and then they fly below thunderstorms, so already formed clouds, right? And then they use a jet of silver iodide, which basically helps the water precipitate from the clouds. So Texas is a very dry. Most of Texas is very hot and dry, right? So these dust particles that are generated in Texas, they basically fly above and then they incorporate themselves in the clouds, and the water droplets kind of get absorbed in these dust particles. So they are not being. So even big water droplets are reduced to small ones, and they are not heavy enough to fall down as rainfall. So what silver iodide does is they basically help these water droplets to freeze because of the crystal structure of silver iodide, and
Mm-hmm.
then they become heavy enough to fall as precipitate. So people are having to go to all that measures
Yeah.
to make rainfall happen, which should be happening naturally. And if we don't incorporate changes in our daily lives, the time won't be very far away when scientists have to make clouds out of thin air.
Yeah. Yeah. So take care, make smarter choices with your life. Anything helps.
And most importantly, stay safe.
Yes. Always stay safe. Leave us a comment. Subscribe to our channel. That has a very, very low carbon footprint. I promise. Just click the subscribe. It's once. It's good for you. And that's it from us. Have
That's
a
it.
wonderful day or night.
And have a wonderful rest of the week.
See you in the next one.
Bye bye.